historian. I did my PhD at the Faculty of Architecture, my bachelor at the Faculty of History, and the PhD at the Faculty of Architecture. So I'm like 0.1% architect. But the main point is after I graduated and we discussed with all these colleagues of mine from academia what we're going to do afterwards after we graduate, we decided that the Romanian culture or milieu, the academic field of production, I don't know how should I name it, is somehow very narrow in the sense that if you don't publish your work, most of the works are not published, remain in and the research remains closed in the libraries of the faculty. So we decided to make this NGO to get some funding and do some independent research in order to give all the information that we require in the academic world to the community. Obviously, it's not a hierarchical kind of connection. It's more like a dialogue. Because, as you're going to see, we took a lot of interviews with a lot of people. So we heard the voices, let's say, of the people, and we started integrating it, obviously, in our research. So the end point would be to create a kind of more or less, let's say, common narrative, a voice in between the academic, literature review, whatever stuff that we know very well how to do, and let's say the voices of the people who live there. So I also prepared a couple of slides in order to show you a little bit of the world. Let me see. Okay, good, like this.
Yeah, now it works.
Okay, so I founded with these colleagues of mine, historians and architects, this NGO, Studio Zona NGO. And we decided on the topic that was very common to us because in the era before smartphones and so on, we used to walk around the city a lot. And during our walks, we discovered a lot of places, which are now very easily mapped with Google Maps, for example. But when there were remember those times were no Google Maps, we just have to go on the flights, right? So I'm going to also use a little bit of the Google Maps version to show you some stuff. Do you see the presentation or the Google Maps?
The Google.
Okay, that's good. So I don't know if you've been in Bucharest. This is our beloved capital. A lot of people, like 2 million people living by. This is the city center. And if you look at the city center, you'll see, while Google Maps is becoming more and more clear, this kind of very traditional urban fabric of the city, with this kind of narrow streets, not very well organized, kind of like 19 or 20, beginning of the 20th century heritage, where nothing was very planned, right? So we used to go around and see a lot of nice houses, beautiful corners, whatever architecture and so on. And we enjoyed doing that a lot, but at a certain point in our research, we ended up seeing neighborhoods who look like this. And immediately you can observe the change of the fabric. It's well organized, all the streets are parallel, it's clearly a form of urban planning. If you go a little bit more like zooming into, we can easily observe that all these kind of houses are standardized buildings, designed with a park in between them, and going to show you there are also like some of these kind of neighborhoods have schools, kindergartens, and so on. So we started our research with a fair answer of, okay, but who built all these kind of houses that are standardized and who look like this? If you take also the little map from Google Maps, you can see that all of them have a quite more or less the same kind of form. Of course, during the time there were some kind of interventions that changed them, but normally they're all more or less look the same. They're standardized buildings like this one, right? A coupled dwelling for 2 families. In total in Bucharest, so we started this research without really knowing who built them. And when we started asking the people, there are a lot of stories, but nobody kind of knew for sure, which was strange for us. Some of the people kind of knew the story, and one by one, we reached something like, yeah, this is easy to understand. A lot of like 25 of these districts that exist in Bucharest that will actually represent social housing programs implemented by the municipality of Bucharest between 1908 and 1948. The map that you see here, I'm going to show you a little bit more in detail because it's on our website, represents the various state companies who produce this kind of housing for specific dwellers. So this is like the orange ones, this is the municipality, this is like the Minister for Transportation and the railway company and so on. I'm not going to enter a lot of details, but the point is that between 1908 and 1945, so up until the communists, in total were built like, let's say it's not like 8,000 of these dwellings in 40 small districts, which are actually housing estates, and with a gathering a population of, I don't know, 20,000 people, something like that. Bucharest population in 1945, when the communists came, were like 1 million. So social housing actually kind of didn't work, more or less, in the sense that it was very way too less in comparison with the population. But what we found interesting in analyzing all this is that the people who live in these houses have their memories kind of shattered, let's say, and they don't know much about the history of this of their own districts. And I'm not referring to general data like the name of the architect and when the house was built or whatever happened, but there's another kind of problem that needed the intervention of the historians. Most of the houses were built by the municipality, as I mentioned, but the bureaucracy at that time wasn't that, I don't know, it wasn't like it is today. So many of the people who live in those houses do not have copies of the authorization for construction of their own house, which they need now according to the new laws. Most of the people who live here, most of the houses were built from scratch, obviously, in plots of land, which initially had, they were not designed with names of the streets. They all had letters, A, B, C, D, whatever, and the name of the plots were from 1 to 200. And the initial contract between the dwellers and the municipality said that you live in whatever housing estate X, street A, plot 125. When the municipality started changing all these kind of names and so on, they had new names, and now they don't know, they can't make the connection between the streets and the names and so on. So what we did, we thought that is a very good task for the historians to involve. Therefore, starting 2015, we started documenting all this with oral histories. We went really on the field and asked a lot of people. We made hundreds, if not thousands, of interviews. Not thousands, that's not to say, hundreds of interviews with all these kind of people, these kind of nice ladies and so on. And we decided to contribute in our field with this kind of flyers and brochures that you can see in the hands of the people. We basically written the history of each of these social housing districts. We gave them for free because we had funding for that, or we placed them in the mailboxes of the people. And all these flyers represent the histories that they actually kind of need in terms of whatever this kind of judicial aspects of all this, but also some parts more like historical, surely identity and so on. So for 4 or 5 years, this is what we did. We wrote each and every single history of all these districts, of course, and gave it for free, as I mentioned, to all these people. Next step was to organize for example, exhibitions. And when we organize this kind of exhibitions, the people would come to the exhibition with their own photographs from their personal archives and give it to us either before the exhibition or like during the exhibition. And this little fellow with a cap here brought like a lot of nice photographs and acted as a curator for the people there. So he was basically, we didn't know him or something, and he was like, "Let me show you what is going on in this district." It was so cool because when you think of the old photographs, I'll give you his story. He bought a camera in 1972, and you know how the old cameras with the film were and so on. In order to see how it works, he just put it on the fence and he made one picture to the right and one picture to the left to see if it works, right? Instead, okay, now I have a camera, I can go in the mountains and make the photos. And he gave us those two pictures that show perfectly the street in one of these social housing where he lived, obviously, which we also put in the beforehand in the exhibition, right? So we had a lot of context with this kind of. We moved the exhibitions along the local libraries in the social housing districts or close to them. So in order to have more people coming there and see the exhibitions. And we also published, let's not forget the academic part, we also published two books, me and my colleague, regarding this social housing histories, right? And when we did our book launch, we invited everybody for like this kind of 4,000 houses that were built. We went previous days with this kind of small invitations and put them, each of them, in the mailboxes of every people from every house. Were like Glovo, but not with food, but with all this kind of stuff doing ourselves. And that's why we had a lot of success in the sense that more than 400 people showed up at our book launch. We had to organize it at the National Theatre, something like that, to have all the people accommodated because we expected them to come. And this, I think, it was one of the reasons that people understood the usefulness of the academic work because we provided them all the results of our research, again, for free, obviously. And you're like answering with a lot of emails and phone calls, like, okay, I got your flyer in my mailbox. Let me tell you the real story of this. I have some nice photos and so on. And I also like, they had the need to talk about all this. And it was pretty cool because we also gathered people in like tours around the city, around the social housing districts. We do it very rarely, like once per year, more or less. And we have like, I don't know, 100, 200 people joining us for this kind of the tours, where we obviously select the most important parts of the social district, all the houses and so on. A couple of years ago, we decided also to do some video documentation of all this, of all our work. So we did 10 little, like 5 minutes short documentary videos, movies, whatever, 5 minutes for like 10 of these districts and put them for free on YouTube. They're not so sophisticated from a production point of view. It's basically the directors who are putting us, me and my colleague, to work, to speak, and there's some photographs from the archives and so on. But the point is, at the end of the day, that we managed somehow to get all our information from the academia that we got from a lot of work in the archives of the municipality, national archives, and so on, to in contact with the community. This is our main aim as an NGO, not as just individualistic research, which we take care in our academic environment, but as much as possible to discuss with this kind of thing. Before I start discussing also our part with the 1945-1958 aspects, there were a lot of discussion with all these people who had various memories regarding the history of their own social district, or the social housing district. And when we started, we had this kind of legends. So, for example, let's pick one, I don't know, public utility. In this district over here, which has like, I don't know, 150 houses. As you can see, it looks in a this is kind of the Romanian version in architecture, Art Nouveau, very neo-Romanian style, how it's called. Standardized dwellings, very interesting, very nice, and so on. When we asked the people who built them, the correct answer is the municipality, right? So with this company for local housing. And they said the Swedish government built them. And you're like laughing, no, the Swedes do not start and construct buildings in Romania. And after that, went to other kind of lotissement, and we found out that Germans, Americans, Canadians, French, English, Russian, Soviets, Swedes, whatever, all like did something before the First World War. Their main concern apparently was to construct social housing in Romania, right? So from all perspectives, that's from an academic point of view, like the objective truth that you get in the archive, that was wrong. But we asked our question, why is that the people who are living in these districts, all of them that we have asked, know about the Swedish government who did that? Well, the truth that we found in the archive is that in 1933, during the economic crisis, the Romanian sold the matches factory, which was nearby, to some private Swedish investors. So for 15 years, the area, it belongs more or less to these Swedish investors. And the people living there remain with this myth that if something is good constructed and it lasted for 100 years, it can't be the Romanians who build it. There have to be somebody foreigner who came and construct good quality housing. In the minds of these people are like, okay, I heard something from my grandmother talking about some Swedish guys, I don't know, or Soviet or German or so on. And this is how the myth remains, right? So what we did, obviously, when we wrote our nice flyers and went with the mailboxes, like, come down with all this. This is why you know that the Swedish government constructed all this, because this is the actual truth, like the historical truth, and this is why you know that this was constructed, right? So we have a lot of this kind of stories. Again, we did hundreds of interviews, so I'm glad to share with you as much as possible, but probably won't have time to this in order to concentrate a little bit on our main focus, more or less, which kind of combines what we did in the last years. So after I finished going on this social housing in the interwar period in 2000, in the pandemics, I was done with all this. So like for 5 years, for the last 5 years, I studied what happened in Bucharest between 1945 and 1950. How did the communists build everything that they built in Bucharest, and what precisely did they do? But it was a little bit, it was more or less the same because I didn't know the answer to the question. Obviously, it's an ongoing research. And we did the research, again, more or less involving the people from these apartment buildings that were done by the communists. And we did in parallel a couple of projects that we used as research tools. For example, we did one something that I didn't do previously, so it's okay to write books. I'm accustomed to write books, to do one website. Maybe it's kind of video production. I let myself somebody filming and I'm doing something like that. Okay, that's easy. But we did a project with augmented reality, which can be accessed only if you're in Bucharest at that precisely spot, where it's like a treasure hunting, where we placed a lot of these kind of treasures, whatever important housing projects, the school or whatever it was. and let the people who downloaded the application on iPhone or Android or whatever go around and hunt all these kind of treasures. And of course, they learned everything about the history of this social housing district. So this was something that it's a little bit uncommon, where I was uncomfortable working at it because I didn't know how to do augmented reality. Of course, there were some technicians who did the technical part of it, obviously. I had to write history as gamification, more or less, which for me was completely new. I mean, I hardly know how to write academic stuff, but scripts for games or whatever treasure hunt, it is a little bit strange, right? And the second part of the research that we did, and not the second part, one of the main research projects that we did in the last years, in the last 3-4 years, was that we analyzed this CVARTAL. CVARTAL is the Soviet name of this kind of urban planning, which involves more or less what I'm going to show you directly. It's basically designing one urban social housing project with apartment buildings with an inner court. So basically in Bucharest, there are like 10, 15 of these kind of projects, which were all built with the artistic style of socialist realism, with this kind of arcades, and a lot of decorations in the facades with the monumentality brought by new Soviet understanding of the worker's place in design and so on. It looks basically like this. And in Bucharest, there are like, again, 10, 12 of these kind of projects that look more or less similar, right? So what we did, as much as we have, I think we have succeeded more or less to accomplish this, just a second, okay, was again to involve the community of the people who are living there in our process of history writing. And again, we went in the last years and we did hundreds of interviews, but now the finality of the project was a documentary movie. So we also filmed all these kind of discussions with the people who are living there, who told us a lot of stories. They told us what they think is important about the housing itself, how they live there, but also about the history of the apartment building. They gave us, as usual, thinking of the previous research, a lot of personal archives, and this time is much more documented, because actually the people who live there were kind of more or less the people who were also in the Communist Party. They had a better financial situation. They had more money for whatever photographs and so on. So that's why we had a lot of personal archives. We joined in this project. We looked at a little bit at the bibliography that was written on Budapest, on Soviet Union, regarding housing and from there we got a lot of way of understanding how the press, mass media, referred to all this housing in the 50s. And from that perspective, we also decided a little bit on the script of the movie. Let me give you some examples. In the 1940s, 1950s, the new genre in the press appeared, the homewarming narrative, which is very well documented by Varga Harris. It has a beautiful book about living in the Khrushchev time, housing in the Khrushchev time. Actually, notice this obviously in the press, in the Soviet press, that every time a new housing estate was inaugurated, the authorities would come with like a very clear portrait of a worker. I don't know, X so far lived in very bad conditions during capitalism, but now she works in a park, he or she works in a factory, has a very good job, and now she has a clean house with washing machine, with water windows, with central heating and a kitchen and so on, right? So this kind of narratives are present like 10 or 15 years throughout all the main important Romanian media press, basically. Another example was the example of the workers who are in the construction site, who are using important Soviet-influenced whatever technology to industrialize as much as possible the construction of the apartment buildings to do them faster. So there are a lot of these kind of narratives that we picked up, and yes, we went in the on the apartment buildings and we asked the people. We were like with the main page, the front page of Scânteia, which is the Romanian version of Pravda, yeah, the official press of the Communist Party. And there was the title with this guy just got a house in this apartment building. And we went to these old ladies who are living there and like, is it true that this guy actually lived here? And we heard a lot of stories that unfortunately we couldn't have the time in a documentary movie to put all of them like as we took them, but it was so important to see their reactions and say, yes, we know this guy, he was the manager of this, like the administrator of these buildings, and he died, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. Well, I have no idea about what you're talking. I never seen this person in my entire life. But the point is that we picked up a lot of this narratives in order to give us also an understanding of what we're going to find in the archives. Unfortunately, Romanians don't like archives at all, in the sense that's a complete mess of the archives in Romania, especially the ones from the municipality of Bucharest, because anyhow, a lot of these housing districts that I mentioned earlier, some of them, they were built even without authorization, because were built by important institutions, the force institution of the 50s, the army and the secret police. So they didn't bother asking for the authorization from the municipality. But the generations changed, and now the people who are living here in these apartment buildings need those archives in order to renovate the building or stuff like that. And they don't know where to get them. And we did this kind of extensive work, and at the end of the day, we located some of the copies of the authorizations and so on. So again, we gave them to the managers, the current managers of those social housing districts. So this is how we thought of us as historians to interfere in the world, I don't know, of the community. Of course, we gathered a lot of these photos. We had small exhibitions, and we did all the photos and so on. Now and then, I'm going to show you some excerpts from the movie. Not too many, but we don't have too much time to begin with. But this is how, for example, for the first picture here on the left side represents a personal archive. Obviously, we got it from the whatever. So the people, nephews or something of the person who was actually living there in the 50s. The same as the one from the left corner, the left corner, yeah. The one from the middle is extracts from the press. The press sent, as I mentioned, all these kind of reporters to go in the houses that were built for the people. And this is the kind of persons that we wanted to locate in the memories of the people that want on the trip. Do you know this person who lives here? Her name was whatever, because we saw it in the text, right? A lot of archives. Of course, we did a lot of filming from the drone, and actually the most important part, let's say, was that when we had our opening opening, the premiere of the movies. We did it at a very nice cinema in Bucharest, in the right side of the picture. And we had like a full house, again, like 300, 400 people showed up at the, at the documentary movie. Not only the lodgers, the current inhabitants of those apartment buildings, but also like architects and the people interested in all that. But we insisted that we have our projections of the movies in each of those apartments, in the inner courts, in the CVARTAL, in the inner courts of that, for each of the apartment buildings. So that's why we had this kind of whatever projections of the movies with the people watching the movie either from the benches that we provided and just there, or directly from the apartments, from the windows of the apartments, because we rented this, I don't know, 20-meter wide screen or something like that. So the people would come downstairs with their own whatever chairs, popcorn, and all the others, and we're like looking at the documentary, and like the meme with Leonardo DiCaprio. Oh, that's my mother in that picture. Oh, that's my father. Oh, that's my partner. Oh, that's so nice, and so on. Right? So I think it was a very successful project from this perspective. We also wrote each of the histories. We put them in like small brochures, and we sold it for like two euros or something like that. That the people who actually won them could definitely buy them like for nothing. And now we're very proud, let's say, that everybody has in the library, more or less, from all these apartment buildings, like a copy of this brochure, because we did like hundreds of them. So everybody would have at least personal, this kind of small history of a small book with the history of their own apartment. Of course, we're coming to a very short end. The main conclusions in this, the future plans that everything that we did in the last couple of years, all the research that we didn't intend to use as such, but now the architects, the municipality works at this general systematization plan of Bucharest. And now they used all of our research because it's public, it's not like any problem with that. And they document it, and they are going to place all these housing estates, either the communist one or the previous social housing ones, in the kind of protected areas, not heritage, but possibly also heritage, but protected areas in terms of urban planning. You're not allowed to construct something else but houses of that size and so on, right? During all these years, we had all these kind of judicial implications. I don't know how to call them. We had hundreds of emails got on our address like, can you help me with this problem? I live on this house from this street and I don't find either my authorization for construction, and I don't know how the street was called, and all this kind of stuff. And we help them obviously for free. In parallel, we had our academic contributions. We published a lot in this year, so yeah, fine with that. And this year, we're going to actually move the project from Bucharest with all these apartment buildings in the 50s. We're going to move it at a national level, which shows like 8 cities in Bucharest and 1 in Hungary, 1 in Poland. We're going to do the same kind of research, ending up also with a documentary movie itself for the people in these other cities of Romania. I'll show you only like one, I don't know, 30 seconds of the movie that we presented. It's online, so I mean, I'll give you the link and all the others, obviously, to show you exactly how the film was filmed and set and all the others, because it's quite fun if you ask me. And after that, I think we can go to the Q&A question. I'll put it on mute, not because it's not translated and doesn't have subtitles, so basically means nothing. The point is that the directors had this idea of doing a lot of a kind of movie road with myself in a taxi while I'm explaining them the history of all this. So we actually got in the cab with the camera and all the others, and they were asking me questions like, okay, where are we heading now? To this apartment, this is the director. Okay, we're going to this apartment building. It was built in the 50s because for that particular institution, and it will use concrete or prefab or whatever, bricks, layers, and so on. And from time to time, obviously, we didn't, it is not just me walking around here. We have other, let's say, experts that we hired for this project. One of them is, we see in this picture, is Irina Tulpure from the Faculty of Architecture, who is discussing about the architecture of this. But as usual, we also have, okay, obviously photos and so on, but we also have a lot of people, I mean, not a lot, but some people that we had to do it in like 1 hour older movie. Some people discussing, and this is like footage that we filmed in an apartment who looks precisely how it looks like in 1958. So that woman who lives there didn't do any kind of modifications of the apartment. So yeah, these are the original chairs and the carpets and all the tiles and all the others. And yeah, print screens, press, whatever screen. So with this film, actually, we're going to go at the documentary film festival in Rotterdam or whatever. This kind of we had Mara as well, Liliana, I think you know her very well. We had some other experts joining us to explain all this. And yeah, it's going to be in the film festival at Rotterdam this autumn, something like that. And I think it was quite enjoyable. One of the last chapters, which I'm going to show you. I didn't name the, not this one. This one. Yes. All this, as you can imagine, are now like people are selling them, obviously, and they get to all these agents, like real estate agents, to sell them. And actually, during our research, one of these apartments were sold. Yeah, whoever had, I don't know, 150 euros or something like that to buy it. And we got the commercial, the advertising, sorry, for this. And we actually had this guy presenting the, hold on a second. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Yeah, we had like a real estate guy who, yeah. Okay, I think you got the point. He's very funny for the next whatever 30 seconds or something like that, where he presents actually because he's selling all this, right? And the directors made a fine cut after he presents how it looks on the outside. The guy says, "Oh, let me now enter and show you the apartment." And actually, we used footage of that apartment building from the 50s, right? Ta-da! Okay, so I think this was the time allocated for the presentations. I know it was a little bit fuzzy and it's like a summer talk. It was like presented. I had a lot to discuss. I can wait for your can't wait for your questions. It's a lot of academic directions that if want we can go into, but I mean that was what I thought that would be a little more useful or interesting to show all these kind of alternative ways of the usage of history and all this kind of media, like from gamification to video to whatever advertising lines and like that, we had to use in order to adapt the research. I don't know precisely what were what was the direction. So thank you very much, and yeah, I'm waiting for your. Okay, I'll stop sharing, but yeah, if it's needed, we're going to come back. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for like sharing all the steps, you know, how your research has evolved from the beginning to how you ended up using different media and different researching different districts. I can always already, we will already start with a question. I guess there are a lot of questions, and I'm also, I mean, you will share with us the link for the film, right? If
Oh
we,
yeah, sure. Let me show.
yeah.
I mean, let me send it right now because it's no.
You could put it in the chat. I think it would
Yeah,
be.
absolutely.